Hey everyone, Sophie here. Before we get into today's episode, just wanted to let you all know I am co-hosting a end of year reflection workshop on Monday, December 18th at 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Eastern. I'm co-hosting with my friend JC Adler. She hosts the Recalibrate podcast, and we're going to be guiding you all through our end of year reflection, reflecting on 2023. How did you show up for yourself? In what ways do you want to show up for yourself differently in 2024? It's going to be on Zoom. It's going to be an hour and a half, and it's just going to be a really good place to connect with a mindful community, to connect with yourself, connect with others, and ultimately better understand how you want to show up for yourself for the new year. So link in the bio to sign up. Definitely think it's going to be a really great experience. So recommend you checking it out if you're available. And if not, hope you can find some time during the holiday season to reflect. That's all from me, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Life Unpotted community series. We're excited to be here as always, and we're excited that you are listening today. We are excited. We have had a lot of insights recently, and since the holidays are coming up, we're about to be recording every day for the next week. So I always find that when we do that, there's always some really interesting stuff that comes out, because when you do something every day, it becomes more natural, it becomes easier, it becomes better, and better in loose terms, but it becomes more like breathing, more like eating, more like sleeping, things that are supernatural. So I look forward to that. I look forward to what we produce for you all, because I'm sure it'll be great. And for this week's episode of Community Series, we had a few people write in over the past week. So I'll go ahead and jump in and let y'all know what's going on. Hey, Daisy and Sophie, love the podcast. I've been making a lot of changes in my life lately, and I don't feel like myself anymore. It's honestly been pretty scary to go through this. I feel like I'm drifting apart from so many people in my life, and I feel like no one understands what I'm going through. I feel uncomfortable sharing these new parts of myself with people in my life. How can I continue to move forward?
I feel like this one definitely resonates a lot, and I think this resonates probably for anyone who's going through change. And I think kind of like the most uncomfortable thing that we do in life is go through change, because we have to remember, we go down this path of going to high school and then to college, and we graduate, and it's a very fixed linear path. And then you do reach a point in your life, for many of us, where we get to an age and we start developing this level of self-awareness. And I've been reflecting a lot on this actually the past few days of, when does this really start? When do we start to become aware that maybe we don't want to continue living the life we've been living? And I think it starts with self-awareness. We start saying, we do like the internal audit. We look around at our life and we say, oh, I'm working at this job, and I'm dating this person. I live here, and I feel anxious all the time, and I just don't, you start questioning things. And I think what happens is kind of like, I love the analogy of you're going from a caterpillar to a butterfly. You're changing, and change is so uncomfortable. It's so scary. It's so unfamiliar. And especially in my experience, where you feel like you're the only one in your life changing. Like, you look at your family, they're all kind of the same. You look at friends that you've been friends with all your life, they're kind of all the same. And that puts you in a really uncomfortable situation of having to charter and outline and create this new life. So I think this is a really good question. Thanks to the listener for writing in. And I'm excited to get into this one, because I think it could be helpful for anyone who's going through a lot of change right now.
Definitely an interesting question. And it's a widespread experience. I think that we can live our life with no apparent change for so long. Think of elementary, middle, high school, college, how all of those are different experiences, changes, but more or less it's the same idea. We're going through the same things. And for me, I felt like my life relatively was pretty similar for a very long time, and I just didn't have change in my life for a while. But that's not true, because when we're going through change, it feels so big. But when we have a supportive network, our high school, our college, whatever, people going through the same things around us, I think the changes feel less scary because you can kind of look around and see other people doing things. And that gives you a level of comfort of saying, oh, I can just do that. It's not necessarily going on your own. You're looking around and seeing what are other people doing around me. But I think we hit a stage in our life, or at least I hit a place in my life where nothing around me made sense anymore. It kind of started as feelings of just unhappiness with my life. Not that I was necessarily unhappy, but I just wasn't satisfied with my life. And I spent a long time there of being unsatisfied with my life in my early 20s, mid 20s, and not really doing anything about it because I was too afraid to make change. But I look back, and ever since I graduated college, I was dying to make a change, but it can be so scary to make a change, and we can live our lives, I think, in this place of unsatisfaction for a very long time. But then something happens where push comes to shove and we realize we have no choice anymore. We cannot just sit in this place where we're unsatisfied. In a way, we kind of wake up to it, and it can be really scary. It can be really unsatisfying, and it can really be terrifying because you don't have the option anymore, because something inside of you says there has to be more to life than this. And that's scary because you don't have an option, and you are the one who's making that decision. And that's something that's different than any other change before, because you're not being pushed into the next grade. You're not being pushed into graduating. You're not being pushed into these things. You could keep your life going the same way that it is, but you are deciding that you no longer want to live this way, nor can you live this way. So that's just something I thought of with this question, because I mean, clearly I've gone through it. You've gone through it. Getting a question shows others are going through it, met other people, hear that they're going through this. And the more that I think about it, we all have the potential to be going through this. Everyone at their core wants to be loved and connected. And I feel like a big realization, a big wake up like this of looking around your life and saying, this doesn't light me up. I'm not excited. And we can live our lives so long like that. We can live our lives so long like that we forget that life is meant to be excited to live every day. We can think that every day it's just getting through. It's just getting through each day. And sure, there might be periods of our life like that because things are uncontrollable. But I think when we start to take control of our life, saying, I'm not going to live my life this way anymore. I'm going to start taking accountability for myself, my emotions. And it's really fucking terrifying, but I'm going to do that. And that's going to allow me to build a life that does excite me every day when I wake up. And recognizing when I don't feel excited waking up, I don't have to attach to those feelings. And that's the ultimate freedom. So to the listener and to this question, that's the journey of from being terrified and realizing you have to make these changes. If you keep following that intuition and that fear and going toward it, ultimately gets you to a place of what being wow, I'm building this life, and that is what life's about. I'm not just following someone else's idea of what life should be. And that could literally mean anything. And it's just giving yourself the time and believing in yourself to figuring out, how do I want to live this life? And that can literally mean anything.
I'm having a lot of thoughts right now, and I would be curious to hear from other people on this. So my thoughts are kind of when I grew up, I envisioned a very specific kind of life. And I think the shift happens when that vision you had about your future is no longer what you actually want. And I think the huge shift for me was the recognizing that, wow, there are other ways to live. There's other ways to live. And I think a really important thing to recognize here is that there is no right way to live. There is not one single right way to live in life. And I think it could be easy, when you're going down a very specific path, to look at that path and say, okay, I'm on this path. This is the right way to live. And it's almost like you have a very myopic view, right? I think of myself living in New York City, and I think of the only life I knew was the life I was in. And, I think TikTok and social media has given us the ability now to see, oh, wow, people are nomadic. People live in a van. People move to Europe. People go abroad. People start their own companies. But yeah, you start realizing there's other ways to live. And I think an important thing to recognize here is that becomes uncomfortable when, I think for me, right, a lot of the people I went to high school, college, and law school with are kind of the same. They're kind of in the same demographic, socioeconomic. They all grew up in similar kind of towns and all come from parents who have similar professions, similar upbringings. I guess I don't really know that as a fact. I don't know what a lot of my friends' parents do, but it felt like things were similar. And maybe the more I think about that, did it only feel that way because I didn't really know them? Did it only feel that way because I didn't know these people within their inner world and know the depths of who they are to understand that, oh, maybe our experience is a lot more similar in a deeper level than I once thought. But just to stay on the question, it's really important when we're making changes to remember that you're going to feel uncomfortable. I feel so uncomfortable every day, honestly, being in the complete unknown, living in a new city where we're building a brand. I started a coaching business. I'm doing all this stuff. And not only that, but it's not even the external world. It's the fact that I no longer feel like this person anymore. So I think I'm going to ask you, Daisy, like, do you feel like the person that you were 3 years ago? And how has that changed for you? And how does that change feel to go through it? Or how has it felt, rather?
No, because I feel like I'm living for myself in a way that means I'm just existing in this moment. In the past, I would spend so much time in my head worrying about myself, being insecure with myself, being concerned with my future, with myself. And yes, this experience is terrifying. I have a lot of anxieties about money. I have a lot of anxieties about the future. I have a lot of anxieties about not having certainty. But I'm able to separate those thoughts from myself, and I'm able to live, for the most part, in this moment. And I've never been happier. My life looks not like I thought it would look. I never knew what I thought my life would look like. But how I feel is how I've always wanted to feel, because it always goes back to I've always wanted to express myself, but I was always too insecure to do that. And I think that's kind of at the core of what the change was for me. I mean, there's so much, but the insecurity of letting go of how I see myself, how I care about others seeing me. And that's, breaking that pattern of caring about those around you and what they think. Because if you are any ounce of insecure and you get placed into a group of friends, any group of friends, you're going to try to do things to get their validation, to do things for them and not for you, to veer away from doing things for yourself because you don't want to be labeled as different or go against the grain. Because at the end of the day, it's just you. It has nothing to do with anyone around you. So I think that's the biggest change is I feel very secure in myself. And I know I'm secure in myself because I look at my life, I look at my finances, I look at all of these things that I thought I used to derive value from: job, savings, all of these things, trajectory, career. And I've really shifted my validation from getting it from others in society and shifting it to intrinsic motivation of, am I spending each moment how I want to spend it? Am I appearing in each moment how I want to spend it? And it almost feels sometimes like I'm doing something wrong because I feel like I'm really enjoying my life.
That's a real one. I think that's a really big one of like the idea that we had that life is going to be miserable and going to be hard.
Well, so many people justify their misery to get them a certain lifestyle. I mean, I look back and I justified my misery to get a certain lifestyle of certainty, of security. And it's not even that. I was just never in the lane that I wanted to be in. I was never appearing as myself. And I was doing jobs that were quite literally opposite of me. And I was never doing things that fit. I was never in my lane. because I was too terrified to veer off from what I thought it meant to be normal. And I don't even know what that term means anymore, because I know if you brought 100 people, random people from all over, doesn't matter. They all had different backgrounds, all had different ideas of life, all this stuff that was opposite of each other. With the right person in the room, you could lead everyone to realize, okay, we're all connected. Like the classic Breakfast Club example of bringing the jock, the cheerleader, the nerd, quote unquote, and the quote unquote burnout. Like when you bring all of these people together, you recognize we are all the same. We all want the same thing. And I think as I've been on this journey of veering off, quote unquote, the path, I realize everyone else deserves the opportunity to be on whatever path they want to be on. And it's never anyone's responsibility that I was never on that path. It's always mine. Because it's easy to be like justifying the way that I'm living my life right now by looking at people who were living the life that I was living and being like, oh, like that doesn't look good. They're probably unhappy. It's like, no, you can't say that. You don't know that. And you are only saying that because you want to justify and find certainty in your uncertain lifestyle. So with that being said, just recognizing that everyone has this capacity. Everyone wants to feel loved and connected. And there might be a lot of layers over that, a lot of layers, but ultimately we all have the capacity to feel and to love. And that negates this idea of anyone being weird or awkward or different. And I will also say, like on that note, I am nannying right now, and I was at a playground yesterday, and I was immediately thrown back into how scary it is to be different on the playground when you're 5 years old, 6 years old, because kids are mean. Kids will compare themselves to you, and if you can't climb the monkey bars like they can, then you're stupid. That could be, an experience we've all had. That doesn't exist anymore. We're adults.
Yeah, and you think about the kid on the playground, and you think about how like you're learning from that age that like the way to fit in is to be like everyone else. The way to fit in is not to be different. And I was thinking about this the other night where I was like, holy shit, like I've spent so much of my life being terrified to be different. I've spent so much of my life being terrified to be different. I've spent so much of my life being scared to deviate from the group, being scared to show up in the group as my true self. Because you look at a lot of these groups and you see that a lot of friend groups or, a lot of career centered, like I look at my law firm, everyone is kind of the same. Everyone's wearing the same stuff. Everyone's trying to fit this persona to be the same. And I think when we're constantly trying to fit into a mold, we lose sense of who are we beneath that mold? Who are we beneath the idea that we've been trying to fit in? Who are we beneath this story?
Is it possible we take that mold because the discomfort of that mold is less uncomfortable than the fear of finding out who we really are and what we really want?
Yeah, because look, when you have a certain life that you've been prescribed, right? It's I'm going to grow up, I'm going to get married, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a partner, and that's my life. That's safe. Why is it safe? Because it's familiar. I've seen that path be done. I've seen that path and I understand the path. It's very simple. You check it off the checklist and you go. Versus, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to move to a new city with savings. I have no idea what I want to do. All I know is I'm generally interested in building this community. I'm generally interested in helping people. I'm interested in healing. And now all of a sudden we're like, oh, we like to write. And you start to see that as you're changing, in order to find out who you are as you're changing, you have to allow yourself to go down this period of not knowing. You have to allow the layers of your personality, of your being to unfold, to find out who are you? What are you interested in? And I think we're scared of that because it requires us to sit through change. It requires us to sit through the extreme discomfort of not knowing. And I think that's why, going back to the question, why you start changing things in your life and you start feeling so uncomfortable, you start feeling like the floor beneath you is moving, is because you have nothing around you that is familiar anymore. You're thrown into complete uncertainty. And it's like, when is the last time that's ever been the case? For me, I don't know if ever. Maybe when I was born, Maybe when I went to high school, I don't even know. I think it was a very quick switch where I went from I'm scared to let me just throw myself into what's safe. And I lived like that for 15 years. So, of course, when we're making changes, it's going to be hard and it's going to be uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean you're not progressing. That doesn't mean that you're not getting to where you want to be. And it's also the reality of recognizing that you don't have to measure how you're doing every single day. You can just keep taking each day at a time. And I'd be curious to hear the listener or hear from other people what exactly are the changes that they're making, right? Because we could talk about changes on the level of 3 years ago, I started to switch my life. I stopped going out as much. I stopped drinking as much. That felt uncomfortable because everyone around me was drinking. And that felt like, how am I going to fit in? How am I going to go to these weddings, go to these social events if I can't be like that anymore? You start to see that like that change starts to deepen. It's like, okay, this isn't just about me not drinking anymore, but this is about, oh, I don't know if I even want to go to these dinners all the time. I don't know if this is how I want to spend my money. Maybe I want to spend more nights home alone. Maybe I don't really want to socialize as much. You start shifting of deepening and deepening of like, oh, maybe everyone around me is a lot more insecure than I thought and is projecting their insecurities onto me, and that's okay, but I don't really want to be around those people. And it goes deeper and deeper and deeper until you go, oh, wait, I don't know if I even want to live here anymore. So, all to say that the facet of our being is so complex, it's so multifaceted. And when we don't allow the natural change to happen, when we don't allow the natural layers of who we are to unfold without trying to control, without saying, I'm changing and this is uncomfortable, we don't give change the natural ability to take its course. I think that's a huge takeaway for this question of you don't have to constantly assess and analyze yourself as you're changing. Let the change happen.
Well, something you were saying about following the traditional path, and we're never saying anything's wrong with that, but there is an impact from the path you choose to take. And what you were saying, Soph, about taking a path that is comfortable and certain and known, it made me think of this essay that talks about, well, okay, I was listening to Zach Bryan talk on a podcast, and he mentioned this, and it's called The Catastrophe of Success. It's an essay from the 40s. And basically, he talks about becoming successful. It is kind of like a void. It can be. It can be a void. It can be a way to not experience life. But I do think that there is this idea that success will save us. Success will give us purpose. Success will give us meaning. But it's like, what is the intention behind getting success? Is it to be comfortable? Is there no intention behind it? Is it to solve all of your issues that you've ever had in your life? I think that's been a big wake up for me of realizing that success that's documented by society might be empty and meaningless to you. And it's up to you to figure out what is meaningful in this life. What makes you feel alive? And that can be anything. It doesn't have to be your career. It can be your career. It can be anything. How do you want to spend your life? And I know you said a lot earlier, Soph, but I just got really fixated on that idea because it's something I am fixated on, because it is something that I feel I'm actively working away from.
Well, when you think about the traditional realm of success, it's like it's always rooted in trying to get other people to view you a certain way. And I think, and for the large part, right, it's like we're talking about, okay, am I successful to the outer world? And is this prestigious? Is this checking off the boxes? Am I making a certain amount of money? Is my house big enough? Am I driving enough car? Do I have nice shoes on? Trying to fit in, trying to be validated, trying to be regarded as prestigious, or, the hierarchy of society. And when you realize that that hierarchy is really rooted in ego, power, and insecurity, and it's kind of like interesting because power and insecurity go hand in hand. And I don't think we realize this a lot of time, because when we look at a lot of powerful people, or maybe people who have high positions at jobs, or maybe they're managing directors or CEOs, and it's those people that you meet who kind of just seem like an asshole, right? They just seem like they're unhappy, and they seem angry, but they have so much money. So you associate, you're like, oh, that person, they have it together, or they're not necessarily an asshole. I'm just trying to paint the picture of somebody who, think of like a boss you never liked, but they're valued in the company. And it's interesting because a lot of the time, power, needing to control others, needing to dominate others, needing to present as such so that other people view you in a certain way and say, oh, wow, she looks so great today and she has all this money and she drives this car, is rooted in insecurity. It's rooted in not being comfortable in who you really are beneath that. And it's fascinating when you look at everyone in the world and these people you've interacted with in your life at jobs and friend groups and events you've been through, to think of all the people who are deeply insecure. And I'm not trying to shit on any of them because I am insecure. I've worked through a lot of insecurities, but the point is that mask gets in the way of us really seeing who these people really are. And that's not reality. That's just a role that we're playing. And it's kind of sad.
That's why it's so important for someone like us who's going through this change where we are being very vulnerable, we are being very vocal, we are expressing a lot of things. It's so important to be able to carry this into any room, post it on your social media, to be this, to express this, to show this, to put things out into the world that really are able to help others soften, to see themselves, to slow down. It's almost like if we're doing this, it's almost an obligation, I feel, to create as much as I can around this topic to reach people. Ultimately, it's not my responsibility to reach anyone, but I feel it's my responsibility. It's what lights me up to put art and beauty and words and all of this stuff out there. Think about it. You may perceive someone, your boss, to be an asshole. You may perceive these power-hungry people at work to be one way, but you never know what they're doing behind closed doors on their own time. Maybe they're trying to get through something. Maybe they're trying to change the way that they experience life. You never know what people are going through. And like you said, the most insecure people put on the biggest acts. Oftentimes in the corporate role, that can be a thing people do as a way to cope. If you're putting out information, you never know who's reading it. And they're not telling their friends. They're not telling their wife. They're not telling their husband. They're not telling their spouses, whatever. They're not telling anyone because they're too afraid to admit it to themselves. Because I feel like I was once there where I was so terrified to be who I was, but I would secretly read books that I was embarrassed for others to see because it reminded me of the human condition, the beautifulness of it, and that we can feel and we can love and we can do all these things. And it took me several years to be comfortable with that. So I guess what I'm saying is you never know how you're going to impact someone from being you. And you can never underestimate anyone. I'm not saying you were saying this. I'm just saying I'm coming to this new realization of you can never underestimate anyone that you see. Never judge anyone that you see for what they're going through, how they're acting. You can have boundaries, but ultimately, maybe they're the ones who need love the most. Maybe they're the ones who need to let go the most. Maybe they're the ones that are the most stuck, but in a weird way, they try to take power and control as a way to cope. But maybe they're the ones that are hurting the most.
Well, yeah, you never know what anyone's going through. So I think when we are going through change and we're changing our lives and we feel, I think the question mentioned feeling like people in my life don't get it or feeling like just feeling different. Remembering that when you choose to show up as you in your life, when you choose the path that is true to you, you will inspire people. And when we don't take these perceived roles that we see of people at face value, when we don't take that immediate resistance we face. So for example, you tell your parents you want to move and be nomadic, and immediately you face resistance. Or you're in a friend group and you want to switch your career, but everyone else is going down the same path, and you feel like no one gets you, no one understands you. And that can lead to feeling isolated. That can lead to feeling confused. That can lead to us, when we're making these big changes, feeling like no one understands. But when we recognize that it's not even about what you're doing, it's not about the external change, it's not about shifting your career, it's not about these things. Yes, those things are really important, but what the core message here is that you're choosing to live a life true to you. You're choosing to live a life true to you. That can mean you are a doctor and you decide you want to become a therapist. That could mean you are working in HR and all of a sudden you want to become a poet and you leave your job and you start working in cafes. We see our self-expression expressed through vehicles of work. We see it done through the jobs we're doing, in a lot of times for people who do choose that they do want to try to make their passion their career. And for some people who don't, okay, that you don't. There's not one way to be. But what I'm trying to say is that ultimately what you're really seeing, yes, on the surface, that person is now a writer, or now they're a therapist, or now they were a therapist and they want to become a mortgage broker or whatever it is. What you're seeing is somebody who's looking at their current reality and they're saying, I don't want to be in this anymore. I'm going to shift this. I'm going to change this. And it's recognizing that you inevitably will inspire people when you do make these changes, when you do decide that the life that you're living is no longer the life that you want to live. And yes, that's scary, and yes, that's really uncomfortable, but don't underestimate the impact you will have on the world by being yourself, by whether that's someone who says, you know what, I don't even want to drink anymore. All of a sudden, you let other people know that they don't have to drink. Or for me, I recognize, I am interested in women. All of a sudden, I share that with the world, and I had her friends be like, oh, maybe I'm interested in women. You give visibility to a certain life to show that it's possible. And I think that that's something to remember when you are making certain changes, is that even though you might feel like people might not be getting it at first, you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. You have no idea what people are processing. You have no idea the way that you're impacting people to show them that it's possible. So I think that just ties into the whole component of feeling like you're making changes and feeling like people may not get it, and remembering that no one's fixed in who they are. No one's fixed in their role. And we always have the ability to impact people, and let that be your reason to show up. Let that be a reason to be yourself, because you recognize while it's about you expressing yourself, it is also about showing other people that they too don't have to be in this rigid box of comfort and familiarity and fear and anxiety, that life is short and that we all deserve to be able to live life to the fullest in whatever that means. And that's what we remember. It's not about what you're doing, but it's about, are you living your life? Are you doing what you want to do?
Yeah. And going back to the question, the fear and the intensity of how scary it can be to make these changes, it's worth it. It's admirable. I think that's what life is about. It's looking around and saying, I'm not living my life to the fullest. Some kind of change has to be made. And that is super scary. But it doesn't matter what it is that you're doing, because it's all just an external experience. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It's the intrinsic, internal experience that comes with overcoming the fear, the pressures, the uncertainty of making a big life shift. That is character building. That is letting go of the idea of yourself. It's shifting the idea of yourself. And there's so many lessons packed into that. And I just want to reiterate, it doesn't matter what it is that you're changing. Of course, it matters to you because that's why you're changing it. There's some sort of intrinsic motivation there. But it's the experience of doing that is what is so valuable. It's humbling. It's exciting. It's a reminder of what it means to be alive, because you're feeling fear, you're feeling scared, you're feeling questions, you're feeling uncertainty, you're feeling all of it. And there's so many lessons that come with that, because we learn when we're raw And that's when we are able to make changes, and making changes is not easy, but it's deeply, deeply, deeply rewarding and purposeful and meaningful. And anyone who is looking to do this or do that, it's scary, but you can do it. I can say that because I'm doing it day to day to day. And 5 years ago, I would never think I was doing something like this. But it's the reminder that you are in control of your life, no matter your circumstances. You are in control of your life. You're in control of how you react to your life. And that's where life begins, is when you realize you're in control of how you respond to everything in your life. You can always find your peace.
And I think that's what we're really learning, right? When we make changes, is we're learning that we are in control of how we react, how we move forward, the decisions that we make. And I think we get so comfortable in life not making decisions for ourselves because we are on this path of decisions that were prescribed. And that's why it's so important to ask yourself and zoom out and say, okay, if I was gonna die in 1 year, or if I was not even that, you zoom out and you're 90 years old and you look back on this one life you're given, right? What would you have wanted to do? What would you have wanted to accomplish? How would you have wanted to feel? How would you have wanted to show up to the world? What is it that you really want to do? And let yourself dream a little bit.
Remove all of the fear.
Remove all the
all
fear.
of the things that you've been told you should do, you have to, because
Remove
what
it
if
all.
this happens? What if that happens? Well, isn't it terrifying to think of, I never lived for today. I was always living for the future. Remove all of the fear. Remove all of the limiting beliefs. What is it that you want to do? And that might not even be the end goal of what you want. But I'm telling you, I mean, it's been, 5-6 months sitting in uncertainty like this? It's a snowball effect. You might think it's one thing. Like I paid $1,000 to join a nutrition course. I'm looking at the books here. I didn't do it. Here all of a sudden I am realizing, oh, right, I love writing prose and poems and all of these things and essays, but I thought I wanted to do something with food. And that's been 6 months of following this interest, of allowing myself to say, what is it that I want? What is it that I want? So it's just keep rolling that snowball and don't judge it. Just keep following it.
And also recognizing, if we're talking about switching your career and like wanting to go and do something on your own, like it takes time. Like this shift for me started 3 years ago, really, where I guess I started waking up and just saying, oh, I remember vividly having a moment where I was like, if I don't come to terms with my sexuality, what are all the possible things I could be missing out on experiencing? What is that whole life? I vividly remember having this, like, what is that life out there that the prerequisite is for me to face this part of me? What is that life out there that I am missing out on? And it's like everything else started to fall into place. But the first step for me was facing my sexuality. That could be different for everyone. The first step for someone could be realize I want to move out of my parents' home, or I don't want to listen to what my mom says anymore. The first step could be like, I actually don't give a shit about getting this degree and I want to drop out of school and do something else. It's recognizing that the idea and story of who you thought you were is not fixed. We're not fixed. We're not meant to be fixed. We're not fixed beings. We're meant to change, and we're meant to constantly evolve over time. And when we get stuck is when we think that that's not possible. So I think it's a recognition of remembering that when you do start to change your life, start small and dream big, because it takes time, but like Daisy said, like it will compound. Like the changes you're making now will start to compound, and all of a sudden, you have a passion project. You say, I'm going to save this job for 5 years. I'm going to really save money. I'm going to do this on the side. That's 5 years of your life. Say you're 25 years old. By the time you're 30, okay. Or you're 35 years old. By the time you're 40, like when we take this approach thinking too much time has passed. Oh, I'm already 30. How can I change my life? Oh, I'm already here. I already have kids. Are you really going to give up on yourself? Are you really going to give up on this one life that you have because you're scared? Is that really who you are? Like, is that really I don't believe it. I think we are all freaking capable. We are all capable of pushing ourselves past these perceived limitations. So
It's never too late.
it's never, ever too late. I remember even thinking that, like, when I started making content at 28, and I was like, oh, look at all these people. Like, I wish I was 23 and I went to film school. And it's like, but that wasn't my path. We all have our own path, and don't judge it. Don't judge it. Let yourself embrace it and recognize that don't compare yourself to other people. There's not one right way to live. There is not one right way to get to the place you want to be.
And don't try to be anyone else, because you're missing out on the potential of yourself when you do that, because no one else can be you. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it's literally true. Just be yourself. And I know we've been told, or I feel like I got that beat out of me, like through society, of like hitting walls and hitting walls and hitting walls, that if you be yourself, you're a failure. If you be yourself, you're not going to be successful. Be yourself. Good luck with that. And it's just not true. It's not true.
Sounds like a bunch of insecurity someone's projecting onto you. And that's the reason we don't take advice from people who are not in the position that we want to be. And that's not even they're in the career, but are you taking advice from someone who gives love to themselves? Are you taking advice from someone who shows up to themselves? Are you taking advice from someone who's fearful and scared and terrified of everything in this world? So they build on the front and they build it up, and the ego drives their life, and they pretend to be someone they're not. And that scares you until you go, oh, that person was suffering a fucking shit ton. And I hope they heal. I hope they realize, but that's not for me. That fear was never mine. That fear was never mine. And that's a big thing we realize when we change, is that the fear wasn't yours. That fear you had of not being able to do those things wasn't yours. It might have been your parents or your friends or a guy you met at the coffee shop that one day who made the comment to you. It's recognizing, what do you, the listener, believe despite every single thing you've been told? What do you believe?
Well, when you really allow yourself to go through deep change, you let go of all of the ideas you have of yourself. And that's a deeply painful experience, because it's ripping away certainty, but it's also giving you literal wings to fly into freedom, because you're taking these thoughts out of your brain, or you're distancing them from your brain, and it's setting you free to actually experience the moment. It's like you're stepping out of your mind for the first time, and you don't have to experience just what's in your mind. You can let go of all that, clean your mind out, brush it out, let go of all of the knots and tangles within your mind, and actually experience this moment. And I know the journey of change is difficult, but there is going to come a time, and it could just be a brief moment, then it goes away, where you look around and you say, oh, right, there's so much potential, because I'm right here, I'm right now. There's endless potential. And just keep moving forward. That's where we find the intrinsic motivation, is when we are able to be in this present moment, because we're not wrestling with our meandering thoughts.
And we're not looking for the immediate gratification. Like, when you're making change, you have to recognize that you're not going to be able to find gratification the way that you used to look for. You may have a long-term goal, and the road might look like you get small wins every now and then. And I think in large part, that's redefining what a win looks like, right? It's redefining, okay, am I showing up today? Okay, maybe, if you're building a brand on social media, maybe your video didn't do that well today and you didn't get a new client, but did you show up, right? It's redefining our goals, because I think a lot of the reason why we get discouraged when we're making change, we're trying to build muscle. Like right now, setting on a new journey of I'm ready to work out again and build muscle. And doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it means that I'm not going to measure my capabilities and my potential based on every single day. It's recognizing that it's a cumulative experience. When you write a book, it takes time. And what's the final product? The book. But the book requires you to go page by page by page. So if we're sitting here and saying, you're writing the first page, where's the book? You're not recognizing that you have to let go. during this time. You can't analyze and fixate on the change. You have to be the change. You have to embody what it means to let go and surrender and just be there without judging yourself and needing that dopamine to keep you going. And that's exactly what we said, Daisy, that the motivation comes within. You have to find the motivation from yourself.
You also have to be the experience and enjoy the experience in the moment. It's so easy for the experience to become about the future, and you can no longer enjoy the experience, and you're on the anxiety treadmill because you're worried about if this is not a good episode, if this is not a good piece of content, if this is an awful piece of writing, then I'm doomed. I'm failing because I'm looking for validation from outside of me. I'm looking for validation from others. And that is never sustainable. That is never satiating. That is never willing to keep us on the path for long. That's why we have to focus so much on allowing ourselves to just let the fuck go, enjoy the moment, because that's where we find our natural flow, our natural play, our natural desires. And as long as we're following that, consistency comes with that. We're actually living in the moment. We're actually experiencing the moment. And that is what is beautiful. And it doesn't matter if anyone else cares about it, because you're doing it for yourself and you don't need the validation from others. And that is how the desire for me to live my life intrinsically has shifted so much. That is what has changed so much, as I've let go so much of the need for validation from others. And I think when we are able to do this is when our life gets very interesting.
Yes. And I think it's remembering, Q Joe Dispenza, Q the science guys or science woman, recognizing that like there's something that happens in our brain, in our neural pathways, in our neurons when we make these changes, when we change habits. And a big habit for me, like you're talking about, and I think this is a big one for a lot of people, is forgetting how to do something forgetting how to work on a long-term task, or forgetting how to do something without focusing so much on the outcome, without thinking it means something about you. So it's like the biggest thing we learned from posting the podcast, oh my God, was like letting go of needing each episode to be perfect, because it doesn't matter. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up every week.
Right? Because when you show up and you're present, you're always going to bring something interesting to the table. It's when we get caught up in judging ourselves and judging ourselves and judging ourselves that we stun ourselves from being actually competent to do anything of value. We all inherently have value, and we've been told. And whenever I say we've been told, I mean that for some reason I have an idea in my head of how harsh life is. And when we shift from living our lives outside of ourselves, worrying about everything else outside of us, when we actually enrich our inner worlds and sit with it, become rewarded from sitting with it, that is where life gets so interesting, because your rich inner world will manifest into a rich outer world if you sit with your rich inner world long enough. And that is when you set your own standard of what success means. You're able to focus on what is bringing you joy in each and every moment. You don't have to look at your life through the lens of how you think your life should be. All of this to be said, going through change is fucking terrifying, but it's worth it. That is what life is about. We're meant to constantly change. Life is not meant to be easy. And that doesn't mean we have to be miserable. That means that we have to be joyous in the face of fear and uncertainty. And that is one of the largest lessons we can learn in life, is to be competent and excited in the face of uncertainty, or willing to keep going forward. It's deeply satisfying. It's deeply, deeply satisfying to do that.
And recognizing that just because something feels uncomfortable at first does not mean that it's not going to get easier. When we started this podcast, it was so hard to even speak into the mic, but we kept going. The more we do things, the more we practice, the more we allow ourselves to go through what is uncomfortable because it's new. If I started posting on social media a year ago and gave up because my videos weren't good and I don't know what I was talking about, I wouldn't be here now 2 years later, where I'm still learning how to express myself online. I'm still learning. Like, life is long. Life is long, so give yourself the chance to learn without putting so much freaking pressure on needing things to be perfect in that moment. Give yourself the chance to experience what it means to learn something new through the experience, by being the experience, by recognizing that the experience is what you're doing. Because if you want to be perfect in one day, then what the hell is your life for? Holy shit, this is a great question. There's a lot to talk about. I just feel like there's so much, like, clearly we're processing a lot, like, of recognizing, like, it's possible to change your life, but it's hard. And that doesn't mean that both can't be possible.
Nope. It's never ending. And it's really exciting. It allows you to be excited again in each moment. Because uncertainty, on the flip side of accepting doses of uncertainty, is moments of freedom and excitement. I feel like I've been saying the same thing for the last 15 minutes. Who knew you could say things so many different ways? But it's living your life for yourself.
I think I heard that one differently.
You think you heard that one differently? Good. So this has been a great episode. Appreciate you all, our listeners, for writing in. And keep on writing in, because we love answering your questions, because it brings new insight into our conversation. And we're going to continue to bring people on as well. We had a guest recently, and we want to continue to bring more people on in casual senses. So
if there's anyone that you would love for us to chat with on Life Unpotted, feel free to send us recs. We're open to guests. Obviously, we want to make sure that, we see their content, we understand what they're talking about, that it's a good fit, but we're open. So we love to hear from our community. We love to hear from you, and submit your questions. info@Live Life Unpotted. Life Unpotted is continuing to grow. We have stuff in the works. We are talking about how we want to make some merch, some cool Life Unpotted merch, but it's all with time, and that's the point. You can get excited about this stuff, but you have to remember there's no rush. Enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride of not knowing. And to the listener, thanks so much for writing in this question. It helps us work through stuff, and it helps us reach people who are also going through this, because we're all changing constantly, and that may look different from person to person, but the underlying common denominator is change. Life has changed. Life is in flux. So thank you all for listening. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate you being part of the Life Unpotted community. Thank you for making this podcast possible, and hope everyone has a nice weekend, and we'll talk to you guys on Tuesday.